Have you ever wondered why some people seem to stay focused, handle pressure better, build stronger relationships, and actually make progress toward the things they want, while others stay busy all day but still feel like they're getting nowhere? Maybe the problem isn't that you need more motivation. Maybe you need a better way of thinking. In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen R. Covey presents a framework built around 7 habits that move from personal responsibility and self-management toward better relationships and continuous improvement. And in this 18-minute complete book summary, we're going to break those ideas down in a simple, conversational way, not like we're reading a textbook, but like we're sitting together and talking about what actually works. We'll look at why your response matters, why knowing what you want changes your decisions, how to prioritize what truly matters, how to create better relationships, and why personal growth never really ends. But there's one idea connecting everything together: before you can change the results in your life, you may need to change the way you approach life itself. So let's get into it, and see what these 7 habits can actually teach us. The first thing to understand is that Covey is not presenting 7 quick tricks that will magically make someone successful. The habits are connected. They build on one another, beginning with how you manage yourself and eventually moving toward how you work with other people. And the first habit starts with a very simple but powerful idea. Be proactive. Think about a situation that recently frustrated you. Maybe someone said something you didn't like. Maybe your plans changed. Maybe someone disappointed you. Maybe something happened that was completely outside your control. Your first reaction might have been automatic. You became angry. You felt disappointed. You blamed the situation. Or you thought, what else could I do? Covey asks you to look at that moment differently. There is a difference between what happens to you and how you choose to respond to what happens. You cannot control every event around you. But you can take responsibility for your response. That is the heart of being proactive. Being proactive doesn't mean pretending that difficult circumstances don't exist. It doesn't mean that you can control everything through positive thinking. And it certainly doesn't mean that every problem is your fault. It means recognizing where your responsibility begins. Someone may criticize you. You can't control their words. But you can decide whether you will react impulsively or respond thoughtfully. A plan may fail. You can't change what already happened. But you can decide what you learn from it and what you do next. Someone may refuse to cooperate. You can't force their attitude. But you can decide how you communicate and what action you take. This is a powerful shift because it moves your attention away from blame and toward responsibility. And once you start thinking this way, you naturally arrive at another important question. If I am responsible for my choices, where exactly am I trying to go? That brings us to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. Imagine getting into a car and simply driving without knowing the destination. You could drive for hours. You could use more fuel. You could travel at high speed. But none of that guarantees that you'll arrive where you actually want to be. Life can work the same way. You can be extremely busy and still move in the wrong direction. You can work hard and still spend your energy on things that don't matter most to you. You can achieve goals and later discover that they were never the goals you truly wanted. That's why Covey places such importance on having a clear sense of direction. Before asking, "What should I do today?" it can be useful to ask, "What am I ultimately trying to accomplish? What kind of person do you want to become? What values do you want your decisions to reflect? What kind of relationships do you want to build? What would you consider a meaningful life?" These aren't questions that need a perfect answer overnight. But thinking about them can give your daily decisions a direction. Because once you know where you want to go, you can make better decisions about what deserves your attention today. And that takes us directly into habit 3. Put first things first. Most people have more things demanding their attention than they have time to complete them. Messages. Notifications. Emails. Assignments. Work. Unexpected problems. Other people's requests. And the list keeps growing. So the question isn't, how can I do everything? Because you probably can't. The better question is, what deserves to come first? Covey's framework makes an important distinction between things that are urgent and things that are important. An urgent task demands attention now. An important task contributes to something that actually matters. But not always. A phone call may be urgent. A notification may feel urgent. A problem someone else brings to you may suddenly become urgent. But working on an important long-term goal might not feel urgent at all. And that's exactly why important things can be neglected. Health doesn't always send an immediate warning. Learning doesn't always produce an instant result. Building a strong relationship doesn't usually happen in one dramatic moment. Preparing for the future often feels less urgent than dealing with today's distractions. So effectiveness requires more than reacting quickly. It requires deciding what matters before everything else starts demanding your attention. Now imagine you've started taking responsibility for yourself, you've developed a clearer direction, and you're learning to prioritize what matters. The next challenge appears. Other people. Because no matter how organized or focused you become, you don't live alone. You have family. Friends. Colleagues. Customers. Classmates. People with different opinions, different goals, and different expectations. And this is where habit 4 comes in. Think win-win. Let's make this simple. Imagine two people disagree over how something should be done. One person thinks, I need to get my way. The other thinks exactly the same thing. Now the conversation becomes a competition. One person wins. The other loses. But Covey asks you to consider another possibility. Can we find a solution that genuinely benefits both sides? That is the basic idea behind win-win. It doesn't mean you should agree to everything. And it doesn't mean every disagreement has a perfect compromise. Sometimes two positions simply cannot be combined. But when a mutually beneficial solution is possible, looking for it can create a healthier relationship than treating every interaction as a battle. Think about a workplace. Suppose one person wants speed, while another wants quality. Instead of immediately saying, my priority is more important, they could ask. Is there a way to protect quality while improving the process? Now the conversation has changed. It's no longer about who wins. It's about finding a better outcome. And this leads naturally to habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This might sound obvious. But actually doing it can be difficult. Think about the last disagreement you had. Were you really listening? Or were you waiting for the other person to stop talking so you could give your answer? There's a big difference. When someone is explaining their perspective, we often listen through the filter of our own experience. We're thinking, I know what they mean. They're wrong. That's not what happened. Let me explain. And before we have even understood them, we're already preparing our defense. Covey's approach is to reverse that order. First, try to understand. That doesn't mean agreeing with everything another person says. Understanding is not agreement. You can understand why someone thinks differently and still disagree respectfully. But when people feel genuinely heard, conversations can become much more productive. Imagine a friend tells you that something you did upset them. You could immediately respond. That wasn't my intention. Maybe that's true. But your intention doesn't automatically erase their experience. A more thoughtful first response might be, tell me what happened from your perspective. Now you're listening. You may still explain your side afterward. But first, you understand what you're actually responding to. And that can prevent many unnecessary arguments. Now take this idea one step further. What happens when two people genuinely understand each other but still have very different ideas? That's where habit 6 comes in. Synergize. Synergy is about using differences to create something better. Think about a team where everyone has exactly the same experience and exactly the same way of thinking. Agreement might be easy. But agreement doesn't automatically produce the best answer. Sometimes the most useful idea comes from a perspective that initially seems completely different. One person sees a problem. One person notices a risk. Another sees a possible solution. Instead of immediately deciding that one must be wrong, they can explore both perspectives. The goal becomes: what can we create together that neither of us would have created alone? That's the value of collaboration. But collaboration doesn't mean abandoning your own judgment. It means being open enough to consider another perspective and disciplined enough to evaluate it. And then we reach the 7th habit. After all this work on responsibility, direction, priorities, relationships, communication, and collaboration, there's one more thing you have to manage. Yourself. That's why habit 7 is: sharpen the saw. Imagine someone using a tool every day but never maintaining it. At first, it may work perfectly. But eventually, its performance can decline. People can experience something similar. If you constantly work without taking care of your physical energy, your mind, your relationships, and your deeper sense of purpose, eventually your ability to perform can suffer. So Covey presents renewal as an essential part of effectiveness. That means making space for growth and recovery. Take care of your physical well-being. Keep learning. Maintain meaningful relationships. Make time for reflection and the values that give your life direction. The important principle is that you cannot continuously give your best without also renewing yourself. And this is where all 7 habits connect. Look at the progression. First, be proactive. Take responsibility for your response. Begin with the end in mind. Know what direction you're trying to move in. Then, put first things first. Give your time and attention to what matters. After that, think win-win. Build relationships around mutually beneficial solutions where possible. Then, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listen before demanding to be heard. Then, synergize. Use differences and collaboration to create better possibilities. And finally, sharpen the saw. Keep renewing yourself so you can continue growing. Now here's something important. These habits aren't supposed to be a checklist that you complete once. You don't become proactive one Monday morning and remain perfectly proactive forever. You don't define your goals once and never reconsider them. You don't organize your priorities once and never get distracted again. And you certainly don't become an excellent communicator after one good conversation. These are practices. You return to them repeatedly. When you make a mistake, you come back to responsibility. When you feel lost, you return to your direction. When everything feels urgent, you return to your priorities. When conflict appears, you return to win-win. When someone disagrees with you, you return to understanding. When different ideas collide, you look for synergy. And when you feel exhausted or stagnant, you remember to renew yourself. That's what makes the framework practical. It doesn't require you to become perfect. It asks you to become more intentional. And there's another lesson worth remembering. Being effective is not the same as being busy. A person can spend 12 hours working and still neglect the things that matter most. Another person can spend less time working but use that time with greater purpose. The question isn't simply, how much did I do? The better question is, did what I did actually move me toward what matters? That question can change the way you look at your day. Before saying yes to another task, ask whether it deserves your time. Before reacting to someone, ask whether your response will improve the situation. Before chasing another goal, ask whether that goal actually belongs to you. Before judging someone else's perspective, ask whether you've genuinely understood it. And before pushing yourself harder, ask whether what you really need is renewal. These are small questions. But small questions can produce very different decisions. And over time, repeated decisions become habits. Repeated habits shape behavior. And behavior influences the direction of your life. Don't try to change everything at once. Choose one habit. Maybe you need to become more proactive. Maybe you need clearer priorities. Maybe you need to listen better. Maybe you need to stop treating every disagreement as a competition. Maybe you need to create a clearer direction for yourself. Start there. Then practice. Because the real value of a book like this isn't in remembering 7 phrases. It's in using those ideas when real life becomes difficult. When you're angry. When you're busy. When someone disagrees. When a plan fails. When you don't know what to do next. That's when a habit becomes useful. And perhaps the biggest takeaway from the 7 habits of highly effective people is this. You don't build an effective life through one extraordinary decision. You build it through ordinary decisions made consistently and intentionally. You cannot control everything that happens around you. But you can take responsibility for your response. You can choose your direction. You can decide what matters. You can communicate with greater understanding. You can look for solutions that respect both sides. You can learn from differences. That's the journey from dependence, toward greater independence, and then toward effective cooperation with others. And once you understand that, the 7 habits stop looking like 7 separate rules. They become one connected way of thinking. Take responsibility. Know your direction. Prioritize what matters. Build mutually beneficial relationships. Understand before demanding to be understood. Use differences to create better solutions. And keep renewing yourself. You don't have to change your entire life tonight. Start with the next decision. Because the next decision is where the next habit begins. And the next habit, repeated consistently, can gradually become part of who you are. That brings us to the end of this 10-minute summary of the 7 habits of highly effective people. If this summary gave you something useful to think about, like the video. And if you want more concise, carefully explained book summaries, subscribe to the channel. Before you leave, answer one question in the comments. Which of the 7 habits do you think would make the biggest difference in your life right now? Your answer might give someone else a new perspective too. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next book summary.